What's going on, guys? Sean Nalawani, SeanNal.com. And in today's video, I want to talk about the topic of super heavy ego lifting versus using lighter weights with slower, more controlled form, and which one is better for stimulating muscle growth, because you'll hear a lot of debate on this from both sides. So before going any further, keep in mind that we're specifically talking about hypertrophy here, and this is aimed at people whose primary goal in the gym is to build muscle. So if your goal is strength-based and you just want to move as much weight as possible from point A to point B, or you're training for athletic performance, then that's a different story. Okay, we're talking specifically about improving body composition here. Now, the issue that I see with a lot of these types of questions is that people usually want a black and white clear-cut answer. It's either one or the other, probably just because it's easier to process, and maybe also because people like to feel sort of like they're part of a certain camp. It's like a bodybuilding identity thing. So it's either I do hard, heavy lifting, heavy lifting is the only way to go, or no, the amount of weight on the bar is completely irrelevant, and it's all about mind-muscle connection and just feeling the muscle working. With most bodybuilding questions, though, the answer tends to lie somewhere in the middle rather than being at one extreme or the other. And there are benefits and drawbacks to either approach, whether it's really heavy ego lifting or lifting lighter weights in a more controlled way. Now, the benefit of going a bit lighter is that by using a slower rep cadence, you're still going to be able to place your muscles under tension and stimulate hypertrophy that way, but you'll be doing it while placing less stress on your joints and connective tissues. The downside is that we know from research that performing the positive portion of the rep as fast as possible and using a more explosive cadence does improve muscle fiber recruitment and strength gains. And that super slow eccentrics aren't necessary either. So basically you're getting decreased injury risk, but probably a bit less overall muscle growth if you're going particularly light and lifting really slowly. Now, on the other hand, we have the approach that says to just lift as heavy and explosively as possible using momentum and to basically just get the weight from point A to point B. The upside there being that as long as you're using reasonable form, you are going to put your muscles under more stress and generate better size and strength gains that way in comparison to going super slow and very tightly controlled. But the downside, and this is something that really doesn't seem to get addressed very much, but is really important, is that this type of lifting is going to produce more wear and tear on your joints over time, and it's also going to increase the risk of a sudden injury as well if your form slips up on a particular set. Now, are you guaranteed to get hurt? No, there's no guarantee, and some guys who just generally have a stronger body structure and who employ this type of lifting in a calculated way, they might be fine, but on average, across the whole population, I don't think there's any question that the super heavy style of lifting is going to be riskier, especially in beginners. You're going to have younger newbies out there who just take this idea of super heavy lifting at face value, who don't have the fundamentals down, don't have a good base of size and strength to work with, and who are just going to load the bar up using as much weight as they can handle in sloppy form, and they are going to be a lot more likely to hurt themselves at some point. The thing that a lot of lifters don't really think about is the fact that weight training is a lifelong endeavor, and instead they just want to know what's going to pack on as much muscle and build as much strength as possible as quickly as possible without realizing that this is something you're going to be doing. Let's say you're 18 right now, not just till you're 20 or 22, but until you're 30, 40, 50, 60, literally decades, and not just for the few years that are immediately ahead of you. So if you're doing really heavy, lower rep bench presses, just dropping the bar to your chest and using a lot of momentum, really heavy lateral raises, wide grip dips, overhand pull-ups with as much weight as possible where the only real goal is to just get your chin over the bar, that stuff is going to add up over time for most lifters. You might be fine for a year, maybe several years, but heavyweight training is actually really stressful to the body as a whole, and most people who train over the long term, even if they aren't using a super heavy ego lifting approach, but are just training more moderately, they still usually experience injuries at some point. Injury prevention isn't just a matter of proper technique or warm-ups or having a properly balanced program. There is just a general wear and tear principle at play here as well. So even if going really heavy was to produce slightly better results, it still doesn't automatically make it the best approach for building muscle long term, because the risk reward has to be taken into account. And we have to ask, how much better of results is it really going to produce anyway? I mean, we have data showing that sets of up to 25 reps can still produce similar gains in hypertrophy to sets as low as 8 reps. Or we also know that 3 sets of 10 can produce the same results as 10 sets of 3. So as long as volume is equated for, there's no clear-cut answer there anyway. And if we already know anecdotally that a great physique can be built without going all the way to that really heavy extreme, that you can get close to your genetic potential without maxing out every time you go into the gym, then I don't really see a good argument for doing it on a consistent year-round basis, especially if you're a beginner. If you're going to be using a very heavy, higher momentum style of lifting, then you should at least be an intermediate lifter and have some reasonable experience under your belt, a good foundation, understand proper technique. I think that for a beginner to jump right into that style of lifting would be very risky. Remember that you're only as strong as your weakest link, and if you mess up your shoulder or your lower back, those types of injuries can sometimes be a one-way street, and they can give you issues literally for the rest of your training career. So again, bottom line, if strength is your main goal, or if you just really enjoy heavy lifting for the sake of it, and you're aware of the possible risk and you're fine with it, then that's up to you. But I would say that if aesthetics are your primary goal and you're mainly training for hypertrophy, your goal is to gain muscle mass, going to that extreme on a consistent basis probably isn't going to be the best long-term approach. So my advice is to just go with a healthy middle ground for the bulk of your training. Not super light and super controlled, but also not super heavy using tons of momentum. Choose a weight that still feels decently heavy for you relative to the rep range that you're using. Use a little bit of natural body movement during your sets. You don't need to train like a robot. Perform the concentric portion hard and fast, but while also focusing on activating the muscle you're trying to target, and then lower the weight under reasonable control. You don't need to do super slow negatives, but I wouldn't suggest letting gravity do all the work either, because I do think there is value in actively resisting the weight as you lower it. And I think that for the goal of hypertrophy, while taking your joints into account, a good 2-second or 3-second negative works well on most exercises. So use that middle ground approach for the majority of your training. And if you want to mix in some heavier ego lifting from time to time, you can do that if you're more advanced and you know what you're doing. Or if you're trying to work around an injury, or maybe you're a bit older and your joints are just a bit more beat up in general, then you can scale back even further and go with a lighter weight, slower and more controlled approach. All of those approaches will ultimately build muscle effectively as long as you're progressing over time and your nutrition is on point. But again, the question has to be, how do we build muscle as effectively as we can, and how do we do it as sustainably as possible? And I think that in terms of really heavyweight versus really lightweight, a moderate approach is probably going to be best most of the time for most lifters out there. So I hope this was useful. If building a lean, muscular body is your primary goal and you want a complete plan that shows you exactly how to maximize your gains in a sustainable, long-term way, then you can check out my body transformation blueprint by clicking here or by visiting bodytransformationtruth.com. That lays everything out step by step, including the workouts, meal plans, supplement guides, and one-on-one coaching. Make sure to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed it. The official website is over at SeanNall.com, and you can follow me as well here on social media if you aren't already. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.